It's Saturday, and welcome to another episode of PO Cubed, your chronological guide to Nintendo's handheld consoles. My name's Deedee Ash, and this week we're playing NFL Football, Gargoyle's Quest, Lock and Chase, Heavyweight Championship Boxing, and Ayakashi no Shiro. Let's start the show. NFL Football DMG-FT, developed and published by Konami. The real football had a shocking start on the Game Boy, but how did the other football fare? It's not my place to delve into the semantics of naming a sport where you barely kick a ball, football. I'm here to review a video game. Madden was still a way off yet, of course, but American football games were certainly around, and there were some good ones. Granted, there were more bad than good, but titles like Tecmo Bowl had the style figured out by the mid to late 80s. In NFL football, the horizontal orientation is swapped for a vertical one. There's little visually to see, the players are ant-like, and there's no crowd to speak of. This needs to be the case though. Soccer Mania showed us what happens when you zoom in too far on a Game Boy screen. At least here, the action can be seen. Surprisingly too, there's little flicker for the number of sprites on screen. Don't expect this to help you in any way though. The game is almost inaccessibly hard. I don't think my personal lack of knowledge is to blame here either. Some of Tecmo Bowl's successes were emulated here. At a break in the play, the offensive and defensive tactics you can use are varied enough. It'll take someone with more of a knowledge of football plays than a Brit who barely understands rugby, of course, and unlike Tecmo Bowl, there are no individual player or team stats present to make your tactic, team selection combination anything other than arbitrary. I suppose it comes down to luck whether your touchline choices trump the opponent's one. There's no real guidance given here. You'd better know your plays because the manual doesn't even help. Anyway, select a tactic, and if you're defending, also a player. After the ball is restarted, you can't change the player you chose, so you better hope the offense plays the ball your way, else there's little you can do. The progress of the game is painfully slow. I'd be hard-pressed to think of a slower one, actually. It's a good job each period has 15 minutes because it takes so long for any movement to play out. The music is pretty well done, which is to be expected from a Konami title. The sound isn't all good, however. If you remember the cartoonish whistling missile sound effect from baseball, that's here too, and it ruins the only real achievement this game makes. Couple it with the lethargic pace at which the game plays, and you get an offensive, not in the football sense, 20-second long scream every time a ball is thrown. In brief, if there was ever a game that feels horrendously dated by today's standards, this could very well be it.
Red Arremer,
Gargoyle's Quest DMG-RA, developed and published by Capcom. Nobody could accuse the Game Boy of only being for little kids when Gargoyle's Quest hit the shelves. Some of the early games were simplistic and a little juvenile, but the first game in the Ghosts and Goblins spin-off series was anything but. If you've ever played the NES Classic or the Master System title Ghouls and Ghosts, you'll perhaps remember a devilish red demon called Firebrand, a frightful little hellhound that antagonized Sir Arthur and made players everywhere throw their controllers around. It was safer in the 80s when they were plugged into the console. This time around, you're actually in control of Firebrand, tasked with saving the demon realm from evil King Bragle. If I were to tell you that this game is part RPG, you can pretty much guess the storyline. You walk around from town to town, fulfilling quests given to you by various barons and lords, fighting your way through castles and dungeons, killing a boss at the end. The RPG elements are not this game's strength, and honestly, they can feel a little tacked on at times. It serves well to drive the storyline, however, which I suppose was part of the motivation for featuring this. The main appeal of the game, as with all in this series, lies in the platforming sections. In good old Ghosts and Goblins style, you can take one hit, but then after that, you're dead. After the first couple of stages, you're presented with the armor of the dragon, which allows an extra hit, surprisingly accommodating for one of these notoriously hard games. You jump with A and fire various projectiles with B. A lot of the progression is accomplished by clinging onto the walls a la Pac Man on the NES, and you'll need to master this pretty quickly in order to pass. Press A again in mid-air and you can hover for a short while, which is necessary to survive many of the platforming and combat elements. Later on, you can increase the flight time, which you inevitably need straight away in order to get across an otherwise unpassable chasm. You've played an RPG before, right? Both your flight time and armor can be upgraded more, and there are a couple of stronger attacks that you can learn too. The game starts you off with very little help, but is a little more forthcoming later on. In between the action levels, you walk around the overworld. The level of visual detail here is on a par with Link's Awakening or one of the Final Fantasy games. It's really quite striking to look at. And there's no exploration needed, it's a pretty linear path that you have to follow, walking from town to dungeon to town and so on. Random encounters will jump out on you periodically, but rather than having a turn-based battle, you enter a mini platform level where the goal is to kill the 2 or 3 enemies on screen. There isn't a massive variety of layouts here. You'll soon learn how to pass each one without too much trouble. Beat them and you obtain vials, which can be exchanged for extra lives. After each of these short interludes, your vitality restores itself, so grind as much as you want to get those vials. There's no leveling up, it's purely for farming extra lives. It's a little disappointing that more wasn't done with the RPG side of the game. It's one of those things that wouldn't be hugely missed if it weren't there. Some form of leveling up system other than here's a thing, you're now stronger, might have validated its presence a bit more. Some of the boss designs are excellent. A memorable early one features 4 gruesome looking eyes, called 4 Eyes amazingly, at stationary points in the corners of a spike-filled room. You need to destroy all 4 parts while avoiding their fire and hovering for just the right amount of time above the spikes and on a moving platform in order not to die. Of course, the level leading up to that boss is tough as nails, and you can only take 1 hit at this point. Suffice to say, health pickups are few and far between. Die, and guess what? You go back. Oh yeah, they weren't holding your hand. Don't be ashamed if you need to use save states to get anywhere with this game. It's as hard as they come on the Game Boy, but the payoff is worth it. One of the last bosses is a massive guy in a chair who sends invulnerable electric bolts after you. This took me such a long time to figure out and will test the patience of even the most astute players. The final boss is tough too, but by this point you have enough power-ups, you can now destroy the bolts to make it achievable with enough effort. The box art is classic late 80s cheese, with Firebrand represented in green. Apparently Nintendo were worried that a red demon as a playable character would be seen as too satanic. Jumping away from a toad with horns and SpongeBob's friend Patrick. In-game though, the visuals are astounding, with an amazing level of detail in the sprites and backgrounds. It looks as good as anything on the system so far, and is only mildly spoiled by a bit of flicker and slowdown here and there. For the amount of action on screen, the developers did a great job of keeping this down. It could have been a lot worse. The music and sound is great as well, suitably dark original music, mixed in with some recognizable motifs cropping up from other games in the series. A lot of games like this suffered from over-recycled music, but there's just enough variety of tracks to keep Gargoyle's quest sounding interesting, and everything is well composed, using the sound hardware to its fullest capacity. A truly masterful game, both visually and audibly. It's a Ghosts and Goblins title, so have something soft nearby that you can hurl your Game Boy onto. Take a deep breath, calm down, and remember, it's only a game, and you can beat it. It'll teach you the meaning of perseverance, if nothing else.
What are you doing? I'm playing Rock and Chase, a video game cartridge you have to buy separately to play on the Intellivision video game system.
Why are you talking like that?
They always do. Then they say your parents have to hook it up to the TV. After that, you can start to pick up gold. Trouble is, the police are coming, so you have to keep both eyes on the game. Oh, brother.
Do they say that too?
Funny.
Intellivision master component from Mattel Electronics. Lock and Chase video game cartridge sold separately.
Lock and Chase DMG-LC, developed and published by Data East. Once again, Data East explored their vast arcade catalogue with the 1990 release of the 1981 response to Pac Man, Lock and Chase. This is a maze game where you play a thief, called Thief, in a bank vault or repository of some sort, who needs to steal all the coins and any other treasures that sporadically appear, while avoiding the attention of a team of guards. Sound familiar? Well, a couple of gimmicks serve to set the title aside from Pac Man. Thief doesn't continually move in a direction. Let go of the directional button and your character stops. This actually feels nicer to me, but that's only a personal preference. There are teleportation doors that take you around some of the mazes, and you have the ability to create a blockade in some of the corridors, temporarily trapping the guards. 2 of these doorways can be closed at any one time, which creates a quite distinct playstyle from that of Pac Man. Coins are worth 10 points each, and in each level optional money bags and treasures appear, which are worth a lot more. Not only are the money bags worth points, though, they also temporarily halt the movements of the guards. Diamonds make you temporarily invincible and a bit faster, and allow you to punt the guards off the screen for more points. After every 3 levels, you can use any diamonds you've collected in a slot machine game to win points or extra lives. It's all about that high score. The premise of the game is basically that. The levels get more complex as you go on, and the blocking mechanic is an interesting addition to the genre. Sometimes guards will be asleep and can be activated or deactivated by stepping on a switch. The guards have different speeds and AI. Some seem faster than others, but the slower ones are slightly more devious. Learning when and when not to trap guards is a must. You always create a door between the 2 blocks that you most recently walked through, and if you're not careful, you can trap yourself. There's no way to reopen a door, they simply disappear after a set time. At first, the game may seem straightforward, but later on introduces the idea of auto doors and switches. On one level, the guards are all asleep, and you may wonder why you'd want to wake them, but in order to get past an auto door, you need to manipulate the guards to walk on a switch that you can't reach. There are secret passages to uncover later on as well. The thing that let Pac Man down on the system was the horrible draw distance. Everything was too zoomed in and the game rendered way too hard due to not being able to see where the remaining pellets were. Lock and Chase learnt from this. You're still quite close to the maze, to the point where you can never see the entire level in one screen, but the coins are bigger and the characters smaller in comparison. You never notice a hindrance to your play due to the way the game looks, and there's a lovely fix for getting lost, whereby if you pause the game, you can move the view about to see where you need to head to. This is such a simple solution that it makes you wonder why Namco didn't see it. The game looks very good actually, with some nice little cutscenes after each handful of levels. The music is chirpy and matches the cartoonish feel of the game. It's excellently composed actually, with a lot of variation and some very nice sound effects. 18 levels in the first game, beat them all and you get a whole new and much harder one to play. With a perfect difficulty curve, tons of charm and just enough innovation makes Lock and Chase an excellent addition to any collection, if you like simpler pick up and play games. Also, where can you get a hat like that? Heavyweight Championship Boxing DMG-BX, developed by Toze and published by Tonkin House in Japan and Activision in North America. A chill feeling struck my bones when I looked up the people responsible for Heavyweight Championship Boxing. The same combination of developer and publisher that somehow managed to make beach volleyball unappealing in Malibu Beach Volleyball were at it again, this time attempting to create a Punch-Out experience for Game Boy. There were really only 2 ways to design a boxing game at this point, either a first-person affair like the aforementioned Punch-Out, or George Foreman's KO Boxing, or a third-person one such as World Champ or Ring King. Admirably, Heavyweight Championship Boxing attempts to meld the 2 styles together. As the bout starts, you see the combatants jostling for position. Move close enough together and your viewpoint changes into an outline of your head behind 2 boxing gloves, which you can swing by pressing B and A for left and right punch. Your position is not fixed. Left and right on the D-pad allows you to move around. Pressing up while punching attempts an uppercut, and down focuses more on the body. Without a direction hits a straight headshot. If you prefer to Floyd Mayweather your way through a fight, you can hold up or down without pressing A or B to block and defend without attacking. Balancing your attacks and your stamina is crucial to success, as laying into your opponent all guns blazing will lead you to punch yourself dry. It's possible to recover somewhat by moving away from the first-person view and evading for a while. The strength of your attacks is determined by power meters with 6 grades in the bottom left corner of the screen. There's one for each hand, and when you throw a punch, that meter empties, taking a few seconds to recharge to the full 6. You can throw another punch before it's full, but clearly this won't be as powerful. This is pretty innovative, and certainly I don't mind this idea. Where the mistake lies, though, is the window at which the meter remains full. If you don't unleash a blow straight away, the meter resets. I don't understand the motive behind this design choice. For a game that's clearly trying to emulate the sport at least somewhat realistically, having your strength overflow like this seems daft, and reduces the efficacy of a defensive tactic. The necessary timing to optimize your assaults while also positioning yourself and hoping the opponent doesn't block is way more arduous than it needs to be. There are several fighters to choose from, and it's possible to attribute skill points to them to a certain extent in order to customize your preferred strengths, whether you'd like to boost attack power, movement speed, or health. Each fighter has a dominant hand and preferred moves. It's possible in the fight, I'm not sure what triggers it, to perform a special punch. Occasionally your gloves will flash, and if you can strike a full-powered punch with your dominant hand while they're flashing, the opponent will be knocked spark out, pretty much guaranteeing a victory. That's a lot of things that need to come together though, so don't expect this to be easy. In our journey to find a great fighting game on the Game Boy, we're sure to punch our way through some dross. This isn't terrible, it's a solid attempt at boxing with plenty of inspired ideas that slightly fall short in a few key areas. I must commend the fantastic music, however, a real highlight on the platform up to this point. The sound effects are few and far between, but with such a high-octane beat, do you need them? It's not bad to look at either, with the silhouette of your pugilist being easy to comprehend. I just wish they tidied the gameplay up more though. The inputs can feel pretty sluggish, and where heavyweight championship boxing falls short in comparison to a game like Punch-Out! Is there's no real way to learn the game, where the elegance in that title lay in figuring out the telegraphs of your opponents and what they meant in terms of weaknesses. They simply don't exist here, leaving you battling through what feels like a hit-and-hope slugfest. That's a real shame, because this game could have been the fighting game I'm looking for. We fight on.
Responsible adults aren't supposed to have fun. Wake up. We can do whatever we want. Drive racing cars to work, play golf in our pajamas, tennis on the bus, or baseball in our mother-in-law's living room. All you need is a Game Boy. It's a personal game-playing system with over 200 puzzle, action, and sports games to choose from. Hey, fun is your reward for growing up. Start playing.
You really got to get one of these.
Game Boy by Nintendo. Have you had your fun today?
Ayakashi no Shiro, DMG-AYJ. Developed and published by Sita Corporation. The Sengoku area of Japan's history is an oft-travelled one in video games. The feudal period of the 15th and 16th century was largely dictated by decades of conflict between many warring clans, all striving for control of Japan. It was our old pal Nobunaga, as well as 2 others, who eventually managed to reunite the whole land under one central government. But not before bloody and costly warfare propagated by daimyos and their samurai warlords. Allegedly, this game is based in this time period, but save from the samurai on the cover, you wouldn't necessarily know it. The title translates to Ayakashi's Castle, where Ayakashi are these mythical monsters that one might find on a long sea voyage. It appears the demon lord Doman has resurrected some of these monsters, and Nobunaga has tasked you, one person, to go and sort them out, so he can focus on reuniting the territories. There are 5 castles to crawl through, each named for a legendary beast of Japanese mythology. Each one features one or more floors of approximately 20 by 20 tiles each, starting easy but getting more complex. The aim in each stage is to collect the 5 pieces of the demon blade needed to defeat Doman. I will say, I chickened out with this one as there is a lot of text to read, and the surface of the game was so intriguing that I downloaded a ROM hack which translates it into English. I'm sure the story isn't crucial, but nevertheless I wanted to experience the game properly, rather than through a dictionary. One of the first things you're told is to find a map. I strongly suggest making that an early priority anytime you're in a new castle. These things are literally mazes, and while the view is clear, it doesn't take a lot to be thoroughly disoriented. Even when you find a map, refer to it a lot, because it doesn't allow you to view the entire floor at once, and you can still get lost. As you stumble around these labyrinths, you'll be accosted by lots of random encounters, starting with things like bats and mice, which soon give way to zombies and ghosts. You can attack enemies, use arts, essentially magic, where all you have at first is a healing spell, or something called All Out, which I wouldn't use until you've leveled up a bit. Essentially, your character will just attack until either you or the enemies are dead. It's good if you're grinding, but if not, avoid. As well as the random battles, there are also certain scripted ones with more unique enemies. These are usually just after you open a door, or just in front of a treasure. You can traverse the dungeons smoothly, and the battles don't waste any time, which is great because this is the majority of the experience. The leveling up curve is well calculated. As you get stronger, the enemies become fewer and weaker, which lets you scour the castles much quicker. Entering a new castle presents you with a sharp difficulty spike, but as long as you've been thorough enough, it shouldn't be too much to overcome. Remember where the front door is as well, because at any point you can exit and replenish health and MP. This will also reset the scripted encounters. There are lots of apparent dead ends and rooms that seem not to lead anywhere. These typically have treasure chests in them, which can provide plenty of weapon or defense upgrades. Unfortunately, you can't see these chests even if you're on the tile next to them. They just sort of appear. A simple sprite showing a closed or open chest would help your navigation massively and stop you retracing your steps so much. Don't be put off too much by the initial difficulty. This is one you're going to need patience for. Save and backtrack regularly. It might feel repetitive at times, something not helped by the lack of variation in graphics and music. I wouldn't say the grind went overboard, though. Ayakashi no Shiro isn't really a game for a short 20-minute period. You'll undoubtedly need an hour at least to feel like you've made any progress. I haven't made it to the end yet, but I've reached Castle 3 and it took me a good 5 or 6 hours on and off. Not the best dungeon crawler or RPG by any means, but an entertaining point of interest for anyone looking for a real deep cut in the Game Boy library. Thanks for listening to the Portable Power Podcast. If you want to support the show, the best way to do so is on Patreon at patreon.com/portablepowerpodcast. Or subscribe on the YouTube. We have daily uploads Monday to Friday, where you can watch me suck at the games as I talk about them. You can tweet me at POCubed or on any of the other socials you might expect. Thanks again and have a great weekend.